the last section that we went over, and you'll notice I've got up in the corner, this is Revelation 14 through 18. We've only gotten through 16 so far, so this is only going to take us partway through where we are right now in the book of Revelation. But we have done these three. We've looked at the coming storm, the last six bowls of wrath, and it starts with this song of the 144,000. Their mission is finished. Again, I think that is a good reason why this is looking towards the end of the tribulation period. Why would they stop ministering? Why would they stop sharing the gospel in the middle? We have these announcements in mid-heaven by these angels. I think they're announcing the very last hours of world history. The first angel comes preaching the eternal gospel. Notice a preeminence is still placed on sharing the saving message. God is still interested in offering that salvation all the way up to the very last moment. Just like in the days of Noah, people could be saved on the ark up to the very last moment before God shut the door of the ark. The first angel then flies through the midheaven, which is essentially our atmosphere where planes fly, and he will preach the gospel to all the earth. There will be no one who has not heard it. The second angel that God will send will preach doom for Babylon the Great. This will be the world governmental system at that time, the religious and political. They will be one and the same at that time. And then a third angel comes and preaches doom for the beast worshippers. So you've got an invitation to join sides with God before he destroys Babylon. Then you've got the warning of the consequences of siding with Babylon and becoming one of those doomed as a beast worshipper. Then you have a blessing to the faithful dead that offers rest from the labors. Blessed are all those who have died. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, so that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow with them. So this again has to do with the rest of salvation for these believers who have not sided with the beast, but have sided with the Christ. Then we get the announcement of two harvests. One is a grain harvest, where the Son of Man reaps and collects. We could think of, I guess, the kingdom parables might be a good place where we could go for some of this imagery in Matthew 13, where the Lord gathers into his barns those who are his. But then we have a second harvest, and this is a harvest you don't want to be part of, and that is the earth being reaped of those enemies of God. The actual mechanics of how this work is what's dealt with in the coming chapters. This is the vintage harvest, the grape harvest, and those, rather than being gathered into the barn, the millennial kingdom, are gathered into the great winepress of God's wrath. Now that verse here is a very popular verse. Many people know from Revelation. That is verse 20, the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood came out from the winepress up to the horses' bridles for a distance of 200 miles. Now people will point out this orange arrow. This is the valley of Armageddon, the Jezreel Valley. It's about 200 square miles, and this is where the armies of the Antichrist will position themselves. This is also outside the city of Jerusalem, so it is a candidate for what this is talking about. I prefer the 200-mile distance rather than square mileage in between Petra and the Gulf here, and that has to do with I think some of the more nuanced aspects of the last days of Earth, which we talked about when we went through Armageddon, and we'll look at those again. But I think rather than being a sea of blood, I think it's going to be a river of blood for 200 miles when the Lord returns to rescue Israel. and conquers his way all the way from Petra up to the city. All right, and then we get chapter 5, which is a pretty short chapter. It's preparation for the coming bowl judgments. We get these 7 angels on a sea of glass mixed with fire. They sing, or those rescued, the rescued members of the house of Israel sing the songs of Moses and of the Lamb. Again, I think these are 2 songs that they sing. It might be 2 songs kind of woven into one. At that point, the tabernacle of God is opened, and these 7 angels exit carrying, actually, they're not carrying, they exit, and then they are handed 7 bowls of wrath from one of the 4 angels before the throne of God with the 4 different heads. At that point, then, the temple is sealed until judgment is completed and it fills with smoke. Now, these last judgments, again, they were so impressive and so terrible that they can't have really spanned much time at all. They build in intensity with incredible ferocity, and it honestly is just something that you would never want to experience, because you wouldn't experience it very long before succumbing to it. The first one is loathsome sores. And when we looked at this and some other uses of this word in the Greek, this probably has more to do with leprous sores than it does with just something like bug bites or even blisters or monkeypox, what have you. These sores would be probably open, festering, rotting wounds that would suddenly appear on people. It could be something like radioactive fallout wounds. It doesn't necessarily have to be supernatural, but I think it will be. The context seems to point towards a supernatural sore, perhaps much like the curse of Miriam, where she is all of a sudden covered in leprosy from head to foot in a moment's notice. These sores are not just going to be the sores you see in an ER from a yeast infection or something. These are going to be painful, open, rotting wounds. Then, again, in close succession, perhaps less even than a day apart, the seas will all become blood, and everything in them is going to die. Not even during the flood of Noah did the sea creatures die, but here they all do, and I think that's expressly stated here because this judgment is increased in intensity from any judgment that has happened before. It is a world-ending cataclysm. Then all the waters and all the springs become blood. There is nothing left to drink. Not only that, but one of the best cures for sores or reliefs for sores is to soak them. You won't be able to do that. All the water that will be on earth will be turned to blood. And there is a special breakout at this point where the angels watching this happen, I think, feel the need to justify God in his actions, or point out how God is just in the actions that he is doing, because these are incredibly destructive judgments. These are world-ending judgments. He is very just in bringing them. So the angel of the water says, "Righteous are you who are and who were, O Holy One, because you judged these things. For they poured out the blood of the saints and the prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. They deserve it." And I heard from the altar saying, "Yes, O Lord God, the Almighty, true and righteous are your judgments." So God is not overdoing it here. God is perfectly just, and he is dealing out the judgments that are due, nothing less and nothing more. Then the sun's heat is increased, and those festering sores that can't be soothed by water anymore are now exacerbated even more by heat. And the result in the hearts of wicked man, rather than turning to God in the last possible moments, is to blaspheme him openly and publicly. Then darkness will set over the beast's throne. This, actually all of this, but this as well kind of points towards an uncreation of the world where God said, "Let there be light" in the beginning. Here in the end, he is saying, "No more light," so that even that light, which was first his presence in the first 3 days, and then he put as a luminary in the heavens, even that is going to be suppressed. It does not say that the scorching heat of the sun will be suppressed at all, only that it will not give off light. So this will be a darkness, and it says it's a painful darkness. Their sores and the darkness will continue to afflict them in these last days. And then the Euphrates is dried up. This doesn't seem at first glance like a judgment as bad as the others, but what it leads to is the very last war against God, the Battle of Armageddon, which is the Antichrist, basically like an ant waving his fists at God, but he goes after the people of God in Israel. We'll do a little bit more detail on that, but after Armageddon comes complete destruction. Now, we did a breakout session, so it's doubled, on Armageddon because not much detail is given here. And that's probably because most of the detail given is in the Old Testament. It doesn't need to be repeated in Revelation. It's not a very long book, just 22 chapters. We've got the 60 plus chapters of Isaiah, the 50 plus chapters of Jeremiah, and 48 in Ezekiel. We can go to those books and the 12 minor prophets, and we gather a lot of information about this final battle, the final days of Israel in this world. And we get 8 different stages that we can identify. First, the armies of the false Christ will assemble in the Jezreel Valley. That's the Valley of Armageddon. This is a staging point, and it has been in history past as well, a place where they go to prepare for battle to go against Jerusalem. This is kind of crosses the border between Samaria and Galilee, if you're thinking in gospel terms. This would be the southern Galilee region, maybe from like Nain down to Mount Gerizim or something. I think that's kind of that valley range. It's about 200 square miles. That's where they will stage the armies, and it was necessary for the Euphrates to dry up so that the armies of the Antichrist, which is a global army, can make its way into the Middle East for this battle. I think they'll come from all directions, but that's the one waterway that is blocking their way. And Babylon will be on the Euphrates River, even though it'll probably be on this side of the banks. But while the Antichrist is staging his battle from Armageddon to go against Jerusalem, while he is away from his throne is destroyed by a group of Gentiles that come down from the northern Mesopotamian region. They will come in and sack the throne of darkness there. And then the Antichrist will get word that the throne in Jerusalem has been destroyed, that his headquarters or his Capitol building is gone, and perhaps out of rage, he will move ahead with his attack on Jerusalem, and they will fight valiantly. We see in Zechariah, and I think in Hosea as well, there are a few passages here. Jerusalem will fight with increased strength that God will give them, but in the end, they will be overcome, and Jerusalem will be sacked. Then the armies of the false Christ will move on to Basra, which has Petra in the heart of it, and his goal here is to finish the deed, to get rid of the tents of Judah that are staked outside the city, here in the protection of God in the city of Petra. However, Israel is undergoing a spiritual conversion at that time. They themselves are undergoing a Jonah-like resurrection. And after 3 days of confessing their own sins, the Lord himself will regenerate them, fulfilling the promises of the new covenant. They will receive their Messiah, Jesus Christ, as their king, and he will come back and slay the false Christ. He will stand victorious over the earth and over this battle of Armageddon. And he will move from Petra, from the Basra sheepfold, up through Edom and to Jerusalem, and finally ascend up the Mount of Olives in victory, leaving, I believe, a 200-mile distance of a river of blood behind him. And that's where we've left off.